Nancy Pelosi said a day before seeing the transcript of the call with the Ukrainian president, we've got to impeach him. We've got to impeach him. So they know they can't win the 2020 election. So they're pursuing the insane impeachment witch hunt. The do-nothing Democrat extremists have gone so far left that they believe it should not be a crime to cross our border illegally, and it should be a crime to have a totally appropriate, casual, beautiful, accurate phone call with a foreign leader. I don't think so.
Well, that was President Trump last night going on the attack in Minnesota, holding his first campaign rally since House Democrats opened a formal impeachment inquiry. Let's bring in Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House and a Fox News contributor. Mr. Speaker, good morning to you. Thank you for being here. I know you saw the president last night. What do you make of his strategy to go hard, go on the attack against Democrats over impeachment?
Well, look, I don't think he has much choice. He's either got to say, oh, this is all really fair, or he's got to say they're consistently cheating. And I think it's clear from his perspective, and I would argue historically it'll be clear, that this is all crazy. I thought that Senator Sass of Nebraska captured it when he said that this is a partisan clown show describing what the Democrats are doing. And Sass is not a big automatic pro-Trump guy, but I think he captured how bad things are in the House, how really out of control they are. And in a way, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine, the fact is there are serious questions about corruption in Ukraine. It's legitimate to ask questions about that corruption, and there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I think the Democrats are terrified that if the president is actually able to pursue this, that, in fact, it will change the whole nature of our understanding of what happened over the last few years.
Here's your opinion piece published on FoxNews.com, Mr. Speaker. Newt Gingrich writes, the resistance against Trump began the day he was elected. This is not an impeachment process. You can go back to the headlines from the morning after the president was officially elected the president of the United States and see that impeachment was already being talked about and already in the headlines.
Yeah, and it's astonishing. He's declared the winner about 2:30 in the morning, and the next day you already have 8 or 9 cities where left-wingers have organized anti-Trump rallies. By December 15th, you have a Vanity Fair article about how the impeachment process is underway. And on the very day that the president is sworn in, January 20th, 2017, the Washington Post has a story about the Democrats planning for impeachment. So Nancy Pelosi is simply carrying out what is an unconstitutional coup d'etat, an effort to use the power of the Congress to change the outcome for the American people. And it's a direct assault on the whole idea of representing the American people and instead imposing Democratic members of Congress as the ultimate electoral college. And I think it'll backfire very badly. The president in Minnesota was in a state where Colin Peterson is a longtime Democrat. His district voted for Trump by 30 points. I think it'll be very hard for Peterson to go with Nancy Pelosi, vote for impeachment, and get reelected. And she's going to put a lot of people in that kind of a choice.
That's going to be interesting to watch. Meanwhile, the president was inside conducting that rally. A crowd of protesters were gathering outside. What did you make of what you saw happening outside of that rally last night?
Well, I think it tells you where the country is. We are as close to a cultural civil war as we have been since the 1860s. You have people very deeply divided. They have literally live in 2 different realities. And I think that you have sort of the pro-impeachment left desperate to get to Trump, led by the New York Times and the Washington Post and the major networks. Then you have millions of people for whom Trump is the first president to really stand up for what they think their values are. And so that's why he consistently is in the 43 to 45 or 46% range of approval, because those people don't care about the noise. They see a guy who they think delivered on the economy, delivered on conservative judges, is delivering on standing up for America, and they're very prepared to tolerate whatever the marginal problems are, because they think he's the first guy they've seen in their lifetime who has the guts to stand up to the establishment.
You've made it very clear what you think the president's strategy should be just over a year out from the next election. Mr. Speaker, how do you think the president is doing since the Democrats launched this formal impeachment inquiry? How do you think he's doing?
I think overall he's doing fine. On occasion, I think that he would be better off to edit his tweets. I think at times he picks fights he doesn't need, or he says things that are stronger than he needs to say them. But he's a natural counterpuncher. He's been doing that since the 1980s, when he used to fight constantly with Page Six in New York. And I don't think we're going to talk him out of it. It's very simple. One, the economy has to keep doing pretty well. And if the economy is doing pretty well, he's probably going to get reelected. Two, ultimately, he's got to convince the country, and I think the Senate Republicans will help him convince the country, that this entire coup effort by Nancy Pelosi and the left wing is totally wrong, totally against the Constitution, has no basis in merit. And then three, he simply has to identify how crazy the left wing of the Democratic Party is. I mean, when they say, for example, that they want to have totally open borders, that would mean millions and millions of people. When they say, as Elizabeth Warren did the other night, that she favors paying welfare to people who are here illegally, or providing free health care to people who are here illegally, or what happened in the House, where all but 10 Democrats voted to put illegal immigrants ahead of veterans. Now, as that sinks in the country, that radicalism, I think, is going to defeat an amazing number of Democrats next year.
All right. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Glad to be with you.